glad you're tuning in.
Yeah, welcome.
We spent quite a bit of time pulling together some really interesting stuff for you on this one.
We definitely have. It's a complicated story, isn't it?
It really is. And it focuses on someone who's been in the news a lot, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS.
Right. And when he first sort of burst onto the scene, especially in the U.S., there was this real buzz.
Yeah, a lot of talk about him being this, modernizing force, someone with a bold new vision for Saudi Arabia.
A real change agent, or at least that was the image being projected. Seemed like a totally new direction.
Exactly. But then, things started to look a bit different, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. The picture got a lot more complex.
We started hearing about crackdowns, people disagreeing with the government facing serious consequences.
And then, of course, the really shocking murder of Jamal Khashoggi,
which just blew everything open. So what we're kind of digging into today is that contradiction. Is he this reformer, or is there this much darker authoritarian side, or both?
It's such a layered situation.
Yeah.
And the information we've been looking through, a lot of it comes from a frontline investigation from around late 2018, just after Khashoggi died.
Right, trying to make sense of him and his rise.
Yeah, trying to understand the man and, the path he took.
Okay, so to really get a grip on MBS, we probably need to start with his father, Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. He seems pretty central.
Absolutely crucial. King Salman, his time as governor of Riyadh was, incredibly long, almost 50 years.
50 years, wow.
Yeah, and during that time, he basically oversaw Riyadh turning from this relatively small desert town
into the huge metropolis it is today.
Exactly. When he started in the 60s, maybe 100,000 people. Now it's pushing 8 million. Managing that kind of transformation, that experience must have shaped him profoundly.
And into this environment, Mohammed bin Salman is born in 1985. It's funny, you don't hear a lot about his super early years publicly.
No, it's not widely documented. But what is clear is his relationship with his father, King Salman. He was reportedly the favorite son, even among many brothers.
And unlike a lot of royals who go study abroad, MBS stayed in Riyadh.
He did, stayed close to his father, apparently right through his schooling. And then after university, he went to work for his dad, who was still governor then.
So learning the ropes directly from him, on-the-job training and how power works in the kingdom.
Pretty much. And you have to remember, Governor Salman had this other really important role managing the royal family itself, settling disputes.
And he had a reputation for being pretty strict about it, right? Keeping the princes in line.
Oh, yeah. Stories abound about him personally stepping in, even disciplining princes who got out of hand or didn't meet expectations. He also apparently handled a lot of their financial squabbles.
Okay, so he's dealing with all this internal family stuff for decades.
And accumulating information. People often talk about these files he kept, details on pretty much everyone in the huge royal family.
Ah, the files. That sounds significant.
Hugely significant. And here's the kicker. Eventually, all those files, all that accumulated knowledge and potential leverage,
got passed on to MBS.
Exactly. Imagine having that kind of insight into the entire family's history, their dealings, maybe their weaknesses. That's real power.
No kidding. And that must have played a role when his father became king in 2015, because MBS rose incredibly quickly then.
Amazingly fast. King Salman moved decisively to put MBS in the line of succession.
It involved sidelining others, didn't it? Prince Mukran first, who was the previous king's pick.
Yep, he was moved aside fairly quickly without much fuss publicly.
And then Mohammed bin Nayef, MBN, who was well known in the West, especially intelligence circles, he was crown prince for a bit.
He was, but then he was replaced too. And suddenly MBS, still only 29, is second in line to the throne, deputy crown prince.
And you've got to remember, Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy. The king's word is basically law.
Absolutely. King Salman clearly wanted MBS as his successor, and he made it happen. People also noted MBS seemed to have his father's, let's say, tougher views, especially on Iran, and a certain decisiveness.
That decisiveness, or maybe aggressiveness, showed up pretty quickly in foreign policy, too.
Right. Almost immediately after becoming Minister of Defense in 2015, he launched the war in Yemen.
A massive military intervention against the Houthi rebels, who Saudi Arabia saw as Iranian proxies.
Exactly. The justification was all about national security, this perceived threat from Iran right on their southern border. The Houthis had taken the capital, Sana'a.
And it happened fast. It seems like even the U.S., the Obama administration, didn't get much warning.
Very little, reportedly. High-ranking U.S. military folks seem surprised. It definitely signaled a more assertive, maybe impulsive Saudi approach compared to the past.
A real shift from their usual caution.
For sure. And interestingly, while some older royals, apparently including bin Nayef, had reservations.
The Yemen campaign was actually quite popular initially, especially among young Saudis.
It was, yeah. It tapped into this feeling, perhaps, that Saudi Arabia needed to be more assertive, to stand up for itself in the region, a kind of nationalist surge.
And one person who was really supportive early on, which seems maybe strange now, was Jamal Khashoggi.
Yes, that's a crucial point. Back then, Khashoggi publicly called it like a 1939 moment.
Comparing Iran to Nazi Germany. Wow.
Yeah, arguing Saudi Arabia had to act to stop Iranian expansion in Yemen. It really shows where he was at that time. Very much an insider aligned with the government thinking.
Okay, so we have this young, assertive leader making big military moves, but he also had this huge domestic agenda, right? Vision 2030.
Oh, absolutely. Vision 2030. This massive plan, fully backed by King Salman, to basically overhaul the Saudi economy and society.
The main goals being...
Well, diversify away from oil dependence, that was huge. Bring in Western tech, Western entertainment, boost tourism, a fundamental change in direction.
And when MBS presented this, people who met him seemed pretty impressed.
Generally, yes. The descriptions you hear are of someone confident, charismatic, knew what he wanted, had this grand vision. Decisive.
He could sell the vision.
He could. And some of the early social changes were quite dramatic, things people could really see.
Like reining in the religious police, they used to be everywhere.
Exactly. Curbing their power, allowing public concerts, music, art studios, things that had been banned for decades, plus planning to open cinemas again.
These were big deals socially.
Huge deals. And there was this push for a new kind of Saudi identity, too.
Yeah.
More focused on nationalism, maybe less overtly on the very conservative religious establishment that had held sway for so long.
He even drew comparisons to other world leaders using that kind of nationalist language.
He did. But here's the tension again.
Yeah.
All this social and economic opening.
Didn't come with much political opening.
Not really. The political space remained very tight. And for Saudis who were interested in political reform, more say in government, this was frustrating. They felt it was just window dressing without real substance.
And this is where the other side of the coin starts to become much clearer. The crackdown on any kind of dissent.
Yeah, especially online. Twitter in Saudi Arabia had been this surprisingly open space, sometimes called the Saudi Congress.
Because people actually debated things there.
Yeah, to some extent, yeah. But under MBS, that really changed. It shifted towards heavy surveillance, heavy control.
And Saud al-Qahtani, a key advisor, was central to this.
He seemed to be the point man. Reports suggested he ran operations to police Twitter, using real accounts, fake accounts, the so-called army of flies, to push the government line and attack critics.
Like Saad al-Faqih, the dissident abroad.
Exactly. And there were even allegations they tried to infiltrate Twitter itself, get insider access to target accounts.
They even set up a public blacklist thing on Twitter, encouraging people to report on each other.
Yes, asking citizens to flag accounts critical of the government. Journalists seemed to be a particular focus.
And the surveillance went beyond just Twitter, right? Using sophisticated spyware.
Definitely. Reports linked the Saudi government to firms like Hacking Team in Italy, and crucially, to the NSO group and its Pegasus spyware.
Pegasus could turn someone's phone into a listening device, basically.
Essentially, yes. Activists like Yahya al-Assiri were allegedly targeted, their devices compromised. Complete surveillance.
Then came 2017 and those big purges. It wasn't just online critics anymore.
No, it escalated. Arrests of liberal reformers, intellectuals, prominent business figures.
That's the Ritz-Carlton roundup?
That's the most famous part, yeah. Dozens of princes, businessmen, former officials detained in the hotel, presented with corruption allegations, pressured to hand over huge sums of money.
Billions, reportedly. And allegations of abuse during those detentions.
Widespread allegations of coercion, even torture, though the government denies it. But it wasn't just the elite. Religious figures, too, like Salman al-Auda.
What happened to him?
He tweeted something seemingly innocuous, just hoping for reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Qatar during that big dispute. And he was arrested. Still detained, facing serious charges.
Just for a tweet, hoping for peace.
Apparently. And then there were the women's rights activists.
This seemed particularly cynical. They arrest women who campaign for the right to drive right around the time the driving ban is actually lifted.
Exactly. Figures like Lujan al-Hathlul, who had been campaigning for years, were arrested. And again, really disturbing reports of severe torture emerged.
Allegedly involving Saud al-Qahtani again?
He was named in some of those allegations, yes. So you see this pattern, projecting reform outwards while ruthlessly crushing dissent inwards. Any independent voice, really.
Which brings us inevitably to Jamal Khashoggi. He had supported some early reforms, but then became a prominent critic in a Washington Post.
Yeah, his criticism grew, especially regarding the lack of political freedom in the Yemen war. He felt he had to leave, went into self-exile in the U.S.
He'd apparently been warned to stop writing, stop tweeting.
Reportedly, yes. Officials told him to be quiet. He was also wary after the 2016 U.S. election, concerned about the Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia, getting too close to the Trump administration.
And that relationship did get very close. Trump's first foreign trip was to Riyadh, the big arms deal.
Right. Khashoggi saw this alliance strengthening and was worried about what it meant for dissent and human rights.
Then, October 2nd, 2018, he goes into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. He needed paperwork to get married.
His fiancée waited outside. He never came out.
Just vanished inside a diplomatic building. It seemed unbelievable at first.
Completely. The initial Saudi story was denial. He came in, he left. But that story quickly fell apart.
As the Turkish authorities started leaking information, recordings, details.
Yeah, the Saudi narrative kept changing. First he left, then there was a fist fight, then it was a premeditated murder. It led President Trump to call it the worst cover-up ever.
The Turkish intelligence claimed they had audio, horrific audio.
Recordings allegedly capturing interrogation, torture, the murder itself, even discussions about dismembering the body. It was incredibly gruesome.
And this 15-man Saudi team that flew in and out, their identities became known pretty quickly.
Yes, and crucially, several had direct links to MBS's personal security detail and to Saud al-Qahtani. The connections seemed pretty clear.
Foreign Minister al-Jubair first denied any close links, but then had to walk it back, calling it a huge mistake, a rogue operation.
A rogue operation that just happened to involve people very close to the Crown Prince. It strained credulity for many.
And the CIA didn't buy the rogue operation line, did they?
No. Their assessment, reportedly made with high confidence, was that MBS himself ordered the killing, even though publicly Trump and Pompeo said there wasn't, quote, direct reporting.
But the leaks suggested the CIA felt the circumstantial evidence, the intelligence picture, pointed strongly to him.
Including that alleged phone call from Maher Mutrab, one of the team members, right after the killing.
The tell your boss the deed was done call. Chilling.
Very chilling. MBS did eventually address it publicly. He said, "It happened under my watch. I get all the responsibility."
But he also said he couldn't possibly know what 3 million government employees are doing.
Right. Kind of taking responsibility, but also deflecting direct knowledge or command.
And then later, the NSA reportedly found those earlier messages between MBS and Qahtani from 2017.
Yeah, showing MBS expressing frustration with Khashoggi, wanting him brought back, and allegedly mentioning something about using force, maybe even a bullet, is necessary.
Which paints a picture of premeditation long before the Istanbul operation.
It certainly suggests Khashoggi was on their radar as a problem they wanted dealt with one way or another. And the UN expert Agnes Callamard, her investigation was damning too.
She called it a state killing, an international crime, based partly on hearing audio of the planning.
Yes. She concluded it was planned and executed by state officials. Despite all this, MBS hasn't offered a direct apology. He maintains those responsible fascists will face justice in Saudi Arabia.
So when you pull it all together, it's this really stark picture, isn't it?
It is. You have the initial promise, the reform agenda, the modernizer image that many in the West bought into early on, opening up socially, economically.
But running right alongside that, almost inseparable from it, is this incredibly harsh suppression of dissent. Surveillance, arrests, torture allegations.
Culminating in the Khashoggi murder. An act of brutality that shocked the world and seemed to confirm the darkest interpretations of his rule.
It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? This whole story, this contradiction, what does it really tell us about how power operates today? About the reality of reform versus control in the 21st century?
It's a profound question. And what are the long-term consequences going to be for Saudi Arabia, for its place in the world? There's so much to think about there. Based on everything we've kind of unpacked, what conclusions do you draw from all this?